The Turtles and the Shredder battle once again, this time for the last canister of the ooze that created the Turtles. This is my review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. So I'm reviewing the 1990s film trilogy of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles before I review the 2014 version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And for those of you that didn't see the first review for the first installment of this trilogy, then you should know that I watched this trilogy a lot when I was a kid growing up. And I stopped watching the trilogy when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I've never seen a scene from any of the movies of the trilogy since then. So after rewatching the second installment of this trilogy, I have to say that the second movie is okay, sort of. The good points. Definitely the best thing coming out of this movie is that it has one of the most cheesiest movie scenes of the 1990s and of all time, in my opinion. And for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, it's the scene where Vanilla Ice is having like this concert in this warehouse by the pier, and all of a sudden the Turtles come in and they start fighting with the other ninjas, and Vanilla Ice is just singing this like rap that he made out of nowhere with this dance choreography that he made up out of nowhere, and somehow his backup dancers know like the choreography as well. If you haven't seen this movie scene yet, then you should definitely see it, because I believe it is pure gold when you're talking about like one of the most cheesiest movie scenes ever. The next best thing about this movie would have to be the suits of the mutants. I know that some people don't like the suits of the mutants in this movie, but I thought that there was just a little bit of creativity in them. Sure, they could have been better, but I didn't think they were just crap. The next good point would have to be the editing, because like the last movie, it was fast-paced, and it was good that it was fast-paced at moments, because it went to point A to point B in a smooth manner. The only other good point I can come up with about this movie is that I thought some of the directing was good in this movie, because I thought that some of the action scenes, some of the comedic scenes, some of the scenes that mixed action and comedy were good. And I thought the directing was good with some of the goofy and the serious aspects. The bad points. The major bad point about this movie is the same thing as the last movie, which is that it was too fast-paced. Because like last time, this movie felt like it was just 45 minutes long when it's actually an hour and 30-minute movie. And when that happens, that tells me that the story could have been written a little bit longer. Speaking of the writing, that's another bad point about this movie, because I thought that some of the dialogue could have been better and the story should have been written a little bit longer. And I also didn't like the fact that there was no Casey Jones in this movie, because Casey Jones, I thought, was an interesting character in the last movie, and the fact that he wasn't in this movie was a little bit like, oh, why? And another thing about the writing that I didn't like was that some of the character motivations I didn't really understand, and some of the story points I didn't understand because I was confused. And I'll get to that later in the spoiler section. The next bad point about this movie are the turtle suits, because it seemed like the turtle suits downgraded a little bit in this movie. The suits looked like that they were different versions than they were in the first movie. Because when the turtles were side by side to each other, it looked like that they had very similar qualities to them. And it didn't look like the turtle suits in the first movie, which had more diversity to them in shape, size, and marks. Another thing about the suits are that I saw the peepholes of the turtle suits almost throughout the entire movie. In the first movie, I didn't notice any peepholes, but in this movie, I saw peepholes in almost every scene that the turtles were in, and it was getting a little bit annoying, because it's like, wow, you guys, it's really noticeable that you can see the peepholes under those masks. And since we're still talking about the suits, let's talk about the animatronics with the mouth. So in the first movie, I noticed that there were a few times where the words being said by the turtles weren't going with their mouth movements, but in this movie, it was worse. In the first movie, it was it wasn't really that big of a deal, but in this movie, it was I noticed many moments where the mouth movements didn't correspond with the word that they were saying. And I was starting to wonder if it was a problem with my Blu-ray disc, but then I skipped to a scene with an actor that was not in one of the turtle suits, the actor that was playing April O'Neil, and her dialogue was in sync with the audio. So that tells me that someone was doing a bad job with the animatronics. The acting could have been better in this movie because I didn't really feel like that there was anything different from the first movie in acting that was different in this movie. Because I like in sequels when an actor from the previous movie comes forward in the next movie and gives just a little bit more of his acting chops in the next movie. The directing could have been better with some of the action scenes, some of the comedy scenes, some of the scenes that mix the action and comedy, and some of the goofy and serious scenes. Because when some of those scenes were happening, it felt off to me for some reason, and I just felt like it was off because of the directing. Since I thought that scene could have been better if it was said in a different way or in a different emotion. Another bad thing about the directing was that when there were scenes that involved the foot ninjas, and when there were extras playing the foot ninjas, it seemed like they didn't know what to do, or the director told them to just like stand there and just like with their nunchucks or nightsticks like try to make cool moves or whatever. But when they're doing like this in the background, it's like, what are you doing there? Like, you're not fighting anyone and you're just wasting energy, so why are you doing this when it's not really helping anyone? The final bad point about this movie is that I think the ending of this movie is a bit sloppy, and I'll get to that in a second in the spoiler section. So my rating for the second installment of this trilogy is a 1.75 out of 4 stars. Like I said, it's an okay movie, sort of. I mean, the only reason it's like not getting a lower score is because I thought that there were some good aspects about the movie, especially the really cheesy scene, since it's one of the most cheesiest scenes ever with Vanilla Ice. But with the bad points that I listed, I just thought that this movie could have been a little bit more better. Alright, spoilers for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: The Secret of the Ooze. If you haven't seen this movie yet, then get out of here now. But I really don't think you need to see this movie. I think the only part of the movie you need to see is that really cheesy scene with Vanilla Ice. Because the rest of the movie is like, yeah, not really good. But if you're extremely bored out of your mind one of these days and you still want to see this movie, then get out of here now, because I'm going to be spoiling some stuff about the writing and some of the scenes in the movie and with the ending of the movie, so please get out of here now. Like I said before in the bad points, I thought that the writing could have been better. And one example of the writing that could have been better was with this new character that was introduced to us in the movie. I forgot his name, but I think it was Kino, maybe. Yeah, I think it was Kino, and he was this teenage Asian kid that was a pizza delivery person who was studying martial arts. And he met the turtles in the beginning of the movie. And later on he discovered them in April's apartment and learned about their origin story. And later on in the movie, he got to help Raphael in this like little undercover mission. But then it was like after that scene, he was barely in the movie, and when he was in the movie, it felt a little bit awkward because it didn't feel right for him to be in that scene. I think that if him and Splinter had a few scenes together, then maybe he would have felt necessary for those scenes, but I didn't really think for those scenes that after the undercover mission that he was necessary. Another thing about the writing that I didn't like, and I said this before in the bad points, is some of the character thoughts. And the main character thought that I didn't understand was of Shredder. Because when the remnants of the Foot Clan and Shredder's second-in-command meet in this like junkyard, and when his second-in-command says that he's in charge, and if anyone else disagrees, then stand up and fight him. And then Shredder comes out of the shadows outside of the shack, and he says, "I accept." And then it goes into a scene where it's like his second in command is like talking about their next plans and asking Shredder if they should rebuild the Foot Clan. And then Shredder is like, "No, we just get revenge on the Turtles." And I thought that was a little bit weird because it's like, well, you can't really get the Turtles with like a small army of your remnants of the Foot Clan and your second in command. But then later on, it's like Shredder decides to rebuild the Foot Clan even though he said like not to rebuild the Foot Clan. And another scene with Shredder was that the scientist was trying to understand why he needed the mutants to like destroy the turtles when he like told Shredder like he had enough men and himself to like fight for mutants. And then Shredder said that his Foot Clan couldn't get the job done and that he couldn't get the job done, so he needed mutants. But that's not really true, because in the ending of the last movie, he beat up the turtles pretty much to the point where he made them give up their weapons before trying to kill Leonardo, I believe. So really, if you think about it, he really did defeat the turtles, but the only reason why he lost was because he got distracted by Splinter after hearing that he's the one that scratched his face, and he got, like, his rage the best of him. The other thing about the writing I was confused about was with the story point about the ooze. Because when the ooze was first used, I thought the entire canister was used to make the snapping turtle and the wolf into, like, the mutants that they were. But I guess that wasn't the case, because Shredder comes into the nightclub at the end of the movie where Vanilla Ice is playing at, and he has the canister, but the thing is, it looks all the way full. And I guess there's actually one more thing I'd say about the writing, and that has to do with the ending of this movie, since I said it was a little bit sloppy. And not only was the ending sloppy, but it was anticlimactic as well, because it looked like we were going to have this big fight scene, because the turtles are out on the dock where Shredder was blown out of a window or something, and it seemed like that he got blown out into, like, the harbor or something, and that he died or something. And then when the turtles were about to say Cowabunga, or when they were in the middle of saying it, all of a sudden they got pulled down and, like, through the docks. So Shredder is on the bottom level, and they see him all, like, souped up on the ooze because he had his vial of ooze that he was threatening with, like, a hostage he had in the dance club or whatever. Anyway, so Shredder is all souped up because of the ooze. And I understand why Shredder is all bulked up, because he used the ooze on himself. But then I was like, wait, like, what's wrong with his armor? Like, why is his armor all souped up also? Because before we saw that his armor was all, like, regular and everything. But then I guess after he used the ooze, it was like it got all bulky and pointy and more bigger. And it's like, wait, does the ooze also soup up the armor? And then we see Shredder, like, knocking down all the support beams beneath the dock, and then it's like, oh, I'm gonna take all of you down with me. And then it's like the dock starts to collapse, and it looks like the turtles are okay. But then it's like Shredder raises his hand out, and then Raphael's like, no one can survive that. And then the hand falls, and it's like, yeah, well, the Shredder's dead. And then I was thinking to myself, man, that was really anticlimactic, because they could have had this really epic fight. Which goes back to my point, which is the movie could have been a little bit longer because of the fast pacing. So that was my review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: The Secret of the Ooze. Hope you guys liked it. And other than that, guys, that's it.